Hare Krishna. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 24, entitled Matsya, the Lord's Fish Incarnation, Text 15. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Please repeat after me. Tamatmano nugrahatam Pritya matsya vapudaram Ajanan rakshanataya Shapaya samanodade. Word for word translation. Tam, unto the fish. Atmanaha, personal. Anugraha artam, to show favor. Pritya, very much pleased. Matsya vapudaram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had assumed the form of a fish. Ajanan, without knowledge of this. Rakshana artaya, just to give protection. Shaparya, of the fish. Saha, the king. Manaha, mind. Dadhe, decided. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. To please himself, King Satyavrata, not knowing that the fish was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, decided with great pleasure to give the fish protection. Purport. Here is an example of giving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even without knowledge. Such service is called Agyata Sukriti. King Satyavrata wanted to show his own mercy, not knowing that the fish was Lord Vishnu. By such unknowing devotional service, one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Service rendered to the Supreme Lord, knowingly or unknowingly, never goes in vain. Om Agyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Tamatmano nugrahatam pritya matsya vapudaram ajanan rakshanataya shaparya samanodade. To please himself, King Satyavrata, not knowing that the fish was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, decided with great pleasure to give the fish protection. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Vidleshmadi Radma Swami Gamani. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Vidleshmadi Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Gamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani. So thank you very much for this opportunity to try to say something on Srimad Bhagavatam for my own purification, and I pray that I may be able to say something helpful, encouraging, worthwhile and bona fide for the pleasure of Sri Krishna Balaram, Sri Radha Shama Sundar, Lalita Devi, Vishaka Devi, Sri Gaur Nitai and Srila Prabhupada and all the devotees. So here we're just starting the Leela of the Lord appearing as a fish, Matsya. And in the previous verse, King Satyavata heard the fish speak to him. So it's not an ordinary fish, but somehow or other, according to this verse that we're reading today, he wasn't aware that that fish was an unusual fish, even though it was speaking to him in a very sweet voice. Most fish, at least in this day and age, I don't know about in that age, in this day and age they don't speak. And they're also not afraid of being thrown in the water. Although it is a very dangerous place, just like this material world is a very dangerous place, but still, everybody's thinking that actually, yes, I'm okay. This is my element. This is where I belong. But this fish was saying that there's so many aquatics who could kill him, which is, of course, the fact. Most fish get swallowed by bigger fish. So this fish was very intelligent and able to speak in a very pleasing voice. But still, King Satyavata didn't know that it was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the verse starts off by saying, to please himself. So, actually he is a devotee, King Satyavata. I mean, he went to the river and he was offering water. And then, of course, the fish appeared in his palms, a little small fish. So he's a devotee, he's pious, but he's responding to this fish for his own pleasure. He decided with great pleasure to give the fish protection. So it must mean that King Satyavata was actually very well trained, because he would get pleasure from doing the right thing, from doing his duty, for giving protection. A king is supposed to give protection to his citizens, all his citizens, not just the human beings, but the beasts, the reptiles, the birds, and all the fish as well. So he was happy, he was pleased to give protection to this small fish, even though it seemed like, in his opinion at that point, just an insignificant fish. He would get great pleasure from doing that. So this means that he's very well trained in his dharma of protecting the citizens. And this is an interesting point that occurred to me, that whatever we're trained up for in youth, in our childhood, generally we get pleasure from that. So our initial training is so important. If you're brought up like some of the young children that we see there now helping, doing some service, because they get used to, you get used to it, you get to know how to do things, certain things, you get an attachment for doing those things. So therefore, you get pleasure from doing those things. So therefore, King Satyavata, he was well trained, obviously. It pleased him to do the right thing. Unfortunately, for many people, who are not brought up in a spiritual life, in Krishna consciousness, especially like myself, born and brought up in the Western world, we're actually trained to take pleasure in other things, not doing your duty. Quite the opposite. Just like the culture, the real culture in a cultured place like India, is that children are very submissive, subservient to their parents. They will get up. I mean, I don't have personal experience of this, but I'm sure many of you do. Get up in the morning and pay their obeisances to their parents. And they would get pleasure from doing that, I should think. I don't know who's had that experience. But they would feel happy. Because actually it makes sense anyway, because your parents, when you're small at least, are your protectors. They're looking after you. So to develop that mood of gratitude and humility before them is a very good practice. Whereas in the West, my experience is completely the opposite. Very rare that children, men or girls or boys, are actually submissive and grateful to their parents. In fact, usually as soon as they get into their teens, 12, 13, 14, actually the parents are always wrong. That is the mood. They're always wrong. They're completely wrong. They're old has-beens. They don't know anything about life, because we're the new generation. We've got it all sorted. We can work all the computers. Like there's a generation gap. Like I'm not very good with computers because I'm an older generation. But the young generation, for them it's easy, no problem. So that tendency is because people are thinking that we're making progress. We are the latest generation. We are the most progressive. But actually, this is the opposite of real culture. So King Satyavata, he was well trained, and therefore he got pleasure in just doing his duty, his dharma. And this brings up another point, that actually if we do our duty, we do the right thing. Of course, in Krishna consciousness we're also taught that we do the right thing even if it doesn't please us. But if we've been well trained, it will please us. That's the point I'm trying to make, that it will please us. So it's just a matter of training, developing the right habits. So that's what actually Varnashram Dharma and Vedic culture is all about, developing the right habits when you're young. Because when you get older, it's very difficult to change those habits. Like, unfortunately, for me, I was introduced to Krishna consciousness at a very late age. I was 41 before I knew anything about Krishna consciousness. So it's still taking me the last 25 years to try to change all those bad habits that are innate. Even if you're no longer you're not performing sinful activities because you're following the four regulative principles, still within the heart, within the consciousness, there's those impressions, those samskaras, which you developed when you were young. So those of you who actually were brought up in Krishna consciousness, or at least in a pious, cultured environment, cultured family, then you are most fortunate, because you already have good samskaras. So if you're trained properly, then everything you do is going to be beneficial. And you may even have the opportunity to perform, as it's mentioned here, agyata sukriti, unknowing pious activities. So Srila Prabhupada says, King Satyavrata wanted to show his own mercy, not knowing that the fish was Lord Vishnu. Therefore, it was unknowing devotional service. And a wonderful sentence, the last sentence of this purport, Prabhupada says, service rendered to the Supreme Lord, knowingly or unknowingly, never goes in vain. So that is a very comforting thought for all of us, because hopefully we have done some sukriti. Some of it's unknowing, some of it's knowing. But one point that occurs to me is actually how much of it is knowingly performed devotional service. Like, for instance, I know, maybe it's just me, but because I was not brought up with Sanskrit, or so many of our songs are in Sanskrit or in Bengali. And even though, we can read the translation, word for word translation things, the tendency is, I don't know if it's true for others, but the tendency is for me that you just go through it on automatic pilot. You just sing it because you know it. The human form has this capacity that you can learn things without even understanding what you're learning. It's good in childhood. Mechanical is good. When you're learning to read, when you're learning to do things for the first time, you do things mechanically, that's fine, no problem. But it has to become more than just mechanical, more than just automatic. So I have to make a serious effort, a serious endeavor to try to meditate on every sentence of Guruvastika, for instance, of the Guru Vandana. Otherwise, what happens is at the end of the song, the chanting of that song, I realize, actually, I didn't think about that at all. So that is unknowing. There's obviously some benefit for just being there and singing it, but it's much more beneficial if you actually understand what because then you're meditating on the Guru. You're desiring the mercy of the Guru. You're calling upon the Guru's mercies, blessings. And in doing that, aren't we much more likely to actually receive those blessings, receive that mercy? So therefore we have to always, everything we do, we have to try to see that it's not unknowing. There is benefit, just like there are many examples, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but I've made a note of some here, of unknowing devotional service. One of the most famous ones, I don't know if it's ever happened here, but of a mouse who was on the altar. Of course, mice shouldn't be on the altar, so I don't know if it's offensive for mice to be on the altar, but sometimes they get everywhere. Practically impossible to keep them out sometimes. So there was once one mouse on the altar, and it was attracted to the ghee wick, and it wanted to taste that ghee on the ghee wick. The flame had seemed to go out, so it went up and started licking, or trying to eat the ghee wick, and then suddenly the ghee wick burst into life again, and then the mouse's whiskers caught fire, and then the mouse went back home, back to Godhead. So that was unknowing Agyata Sukriti. There are many other examples. Another one is Prahlad Maharaj. I was just reading Ishvara Prabhu and Bhumi Pati Prabhu's, what's it called? Puranic Charitavali, that's it. Puranic Charitavali. And in that they're describing so many different characters, personalities. And one of them they describe, it's quite some length, is Prahlad Maharaj. And he describes how in his previous life, which is, it's described in the Brihan Narasingha Purana and the Hari Bhakti Vilas, apparently. And there, Lord Nrsingadev himself speaks to Prahlad, and he says, in ancient times, in the city of Avantipura, there lived a Brahmana named Vasu Sharma, who was well versed in the Vedas. His wife Shushila was chaste, pious, and devoted to him, and so her glories were spread all over the 3 worlds. Vasu Sharma had 5 sons by Shushila. The first 4 sons were learned, pious, and devoted to their father, but the youngest son, you, Prahlad, had no good character, and so became attracted to a prostitute. Your name in that life was Vasudeva. Association with that prostitute stole all your good fortune, and your behavior became uncivilized. Once on Nrsimha Chaturdasi, you quarreled with her, and as a result, you both unintentionally fasted and stayed awake the entire night. They must have been really attached to each other to quarrel for a whole night and stay awake. Because of this, both, Nrsimhadev says to Prahlad, he says, both you and the prostitute obtained the fruit of observing the Nrsimha Chaturdasi vow. The prostitute became an apsara in her next life. After enjoying life in the heavenly planets for some time, she eventually became my dear maidservant. You too became my dear devotee and took birth as the son of Hiranyakashipu. So that was Agyata Sukriti that enabled Prahlad Maharaj to take birth as a great devotee. Of course, it was mixed. He was also born in a family of demons, but in one sense that didn't matter. There's a few other examples. Actually, there's an example of Maitreya Muni meeting the Lord on the bank of Saraswati. This is in the 3rd canto, 4th chapter. Although Maitreya was a great learned sage, it was by good fortune that he met the Lord, not because of his great learning. So he was a great sage with great learning and highly respected, but still he wasn't actually a pure devotee. So Srila Prabhupada describes in the purport how, therefore, because he wasn't a pure devotee, it was accidental devotional service, or Agyata Sukriti. But actually, as a result of doing that, because Uddhava was there at the same time, and actually the Lord was spending more of his time with Uddhava and really kind of neglecting Maitreya Muni. And so he heard the exchanges between the Lord and Uddhava. Maitreya Muni heard these exchanges. And then, as a result of that, he realized, actually, because he was somewhat of a monist, a jnani and a monist, so he realized actually that the supreme perfection of life is to get the association of the Supreme Lord. So that's another example. In the 4th canto, verse 20, chapter 21, Srila Prabhupada says in one purport that the theory of chance, because one idea is that it's just accidental devotional service. So accidental means by chance. But in one sense we know there is no such thing as chance. So Srila Prabhupada says the theory of chance can best be explained in the Vedic literature by the words Agyata Sukriti, which refer to pious activities performed without the actor's knowledge. But these are also planned, he says. For example, Krishna comes as an ordinary human being. He comes as a devotee like Lord Chaitanya, or he sends his representative, the spiritual master or pure devotee. This is also the planned activity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They come to canvas and educate, and thus a person in the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord gets a chance to mix with them, talk with them, and take lessons from them. And somehow or other, if a conditioned soul surrenders to such personalities, and by intimate association with them chances to become Krishna conscious, he is saved from the material conditions of life. So this is what the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is all about. Actually trying to give Agyata Sukriti to so many conditioned souls. And one point is that the Lord, like Matsya, he appeared just as an insignificant little fish. So sometimes the Lord appears in our lives in some insignificant way. I don't know if any of you have had that experience. For instance, for me, the Lord appeared as a little invitation card. That was the first I ever knew about Krishna consciousness. I was in London, working in London as an accountant, and my son was on Oxford Street, which is the main shopping street of London, and he was with his friends. He was 15 years old at the time. And he was given a card by one devotee, obviously by a devotee, from Sri Sri Radha Landaneshwara temple, the first full-size Radha Krishna deities in ISKCON, you might like to know. Very merciful, very beautiful, very kind. And so he passed it, this invitation card. It was to the lunch program. For many years, even before, that was in 1994 when I went there first time, but for many years before that, they had a lunch program, and they're still carrying on that lunch program now. So it starts off with the midday arti, and then from 1 o'clock till about 1:45 is a class, an introductory class, and then prasadam. So I received this invitation card. It said, free vegetarian meal. I was already a vegetarian, had been a vegetarian for about a year, and this card, for some reason, it was magnetic. It was glowing for some reason. I didn't know why, but I just couldn't. I used it as a bookmark. I was always reading something, so I used it as a bookmark, and I kept looking at it. I couldn't understand, why is this so attractive? This little card. Actually, it had the Maha Mantra on it, so that's one reason why it was very attractive. Also, it was attractive because it was free vegetarian meal. So eventually, I actually had it. I was suit and tie, briefcase, not bowler hat or anything. People don't wear bowler hats in London anymore. Well, maybe one or two, but very rarely. But anyway, very straight, sort of laced kind of person, and it was because it was not my kind of thing to go to some far out thing like a Hare Krishna temple, but still I was fascinated by this card, and eventually I decided, when I wasn't in my suit and tie, to go to the temple and check it out. And so that's how come I landed up here today. There's a lot more to it than that, but so the Lord appears in a very insignificant way too. I was hearing how one devotee, the insignificant way in which the Lord appeared was a samosa. Took a samosa from Radha Rasbihari temple in Mumbai, and that samosa was just out of this world. Couldn't be compared to anything else. Actually, I also had the same experience. My first Sunday feast, after I went on a Saturday to the lunch program, then a week or two later, I went to a Sunday feast. And it was like an explosion in my consciousness. I could swear to you that I actually became intoxicated by that prasadam. And I also thought that when I went home, my feet didn't touch the ground. I'm sure they possibly did, but that's how I felt anyway. So yes, this one devotee, his introduction was a samosa, and that's what blew his mind. And others may have other experiences. I remember hearing about somebody who said they were attracted by the conch, hearing the conch go. That's what really attracted them. Wow, that's amazing, the conch. And of course, so many people are attracted by the Rath Yatra festival, which is not so insignificant, of course. But the point is that the Lord, he, like that saying goes in like a needle, out like a plow. So he's always looking for ways in which he can actually influence us. He can actually create, he can plan some agyata sukriti. Actually, his whole appearance as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is for that purpose. And his taking sannyas was for the same reason, so that people would actually get agyata sukriti. They would bow down before him as a sannyasi. And of course, Krishna's appearance in Boma Vrindavan is also just to attract the conditioned living entities who may not understand much really about. When you see the pilgrims walking past here, sometimes they never even look at the deities. They're actually more interested in looking at us, especially those of Western origin, like that. But still, they'll get some benefit from that. But they don't realize, of course, they get far more benefit by actually looking at Radha and Krishna, Gaunitai. But of course, the greatest benefit is that their lordships see us. That's more beneficial than we see them. And in fact, that was what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said. Don't try to see Krishna, let him see you. Try to do something that will attract him to you. So we're trying to exercise our intelligence to provide some agyata sukriti for all the conditioned souls. Of course, these temples are for that purpose. And the more magnificent those temples are, the more that people will appreciate Krishna consciousness. Like, for instance, when I first came to India in 1997, I first landed in Mumbai, and then took a flight to Calcutta, then went to Mayapur. I was so impressed by Mayapur. And one of the things that impressed me was after Mangalati, seemed like hundreds of local people who were being taught how to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. Hundreds of people all at once, every day, learning the Maha Mantra. But I was just, that had a big effect on me. It built my faith a great deal. So what to speak now of this temple of the Vedic planetarium? What's the purpose of it? Just to impress people, actually. Because if they think, yes, this Krishna conscious movement is not something insignificant. It's not just some cult. Of course, it is a cult in a positive sense. It's a culture, and it's very valuable, very worthwhile. But especially Western people, I believe that they will actually be attracted to go and see one of the wonders of the world, as it will be, the TOVP. And when they get there, they see, and as a city builds up around it more and more, then they will see, oh yes, we have to take this seriously. These devotees are not just fools, who just dropped out of society. Because sometimes that's what people think, that devotees just couldn't make it in everyday society, so therefore, they just join an ashram. And that may be the case in a few instances. But actually, the devotees should be expert. So that's why this temple of the Vedic planetarium is being built, to attract. Already, even though it's not finished, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, even millions of people are attracted to go to Mayapur, even more than here. So this is what we have to do. And the another aspect, we just had Bhakti Raghava Swami here. He was talking about Varnashram or Vedic sociology. One very important aspect is actually farm communities, where people can live together, because this will also promote Krishna consciousness amongst those people who are fed up, exhausted with regular society, who don't actually want to join the rat race, because they can see it's futile, it's useless, it has no purpose. You just maybe make a lot of money and then get old and die. So we have to also provide alternative ways of living all over the world. Another aspect which occurred to me is actually devotees have to set a good example. This is actually very big preaching, especially those, well, all devotees of course, but especially those who are working outside, grihastas, who are working and living in a local community. If they actually present themselves in an exemplary manner, as perfect as they can be, then this will impress people also. So we have to set a good example, and then people will think, oh, this person is such a nice person, and they'll be impressed. Why? How is it that you seem happy, you seem to be very together, you seem to have things sorted out? Of course, so we should try actually to have a settled and progressive material life as well. That's one of the points that Bhakti Raghava Swami was making. It's not just about spiritual life. We actually also have to make sure that materially we are well positioned, so that we can be happy and purposeful in our pursuit of Krishna consciousness, but also to avoid disturbance, not only to ourselves and our own families, but also to set an example to others that actually this is the best way of life, that Krishna consciousness is the best way of life. And that's one of the things that always comforts me whenever I get a bit mental, which happens sometimes, I can assure you. And I start thinking, actually it's not working or something like that. Then I actually start thinking, well, is there any alternative? Is there anybody on this planet who lives a better life than sincere devotees of Krishna? And actually, my answer to that question, even if I'm feeling really down for some reason, is no. There's nobody, certainly not in numbers. Of course, there are individuals who are maybe elevated souls who haven't yet come in touch with Krishna consciousness for some reason or other. But as a community, is there anybody who can compare to devotees of the Lord? And my firm conviction is, the answer is no. Sincere devotees, following strictly the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, the previous acharyas, the Vedic literature, the devotees in general, actually they are the best people. And therefore, even though there may seem to be some discrepancy, we should think of that as just being, like pock marks on the moon. Insignificant, actually, not to be considered, really. So if we give people a good example, that is actually the best way that we can preach. Because many times we can't actually say, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because that may be that preaching to the faithless. It may actually put people back. So maybe the first step is set a good example and give some prasadam and be a good friend to others, and then gradually they will open up. So it's 5 to 9. There's a lot more I've got noted down here, but there's not time. So if there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to try to answer. Yes, professional question asker. Hare Krishna.
You are sharing your pastimes. Very good. So when we hear the pastimes of different devotees in different manner, naturally we are attracted that how each and every devotee going to Krishna consciousness. So please thank you very much for your bringing your experience.
Sorry, could you say again? I didn't quite catch.
Devotee, when they are speaking about their pastimes.
Speaking about pastimes.
How did they enter the ISKCON?
Uh-huh.
So when you hear something, then you enjoy it, that how the pastimes of a different persons they are talking in different way.
Mm-hmm.
You are attracted to those things. That are very good how we became this person. So it's very good to hear these things.
Yeah.
Very good to hear. And if we can have a small books,
Have us.
the experience of the people and listen to those books, and let the people know how the
Yeah.
person came to Jesus.
Well, there are things like that. In Back to Godhead, often there's stories of how I came to Krishna consciousness. There's usually a section called How I Came to Krishna consciousness. Also, there's lots of videos. Same title, How I Came to Krishna consciousness. You can see on the internet. And it's actually, yes, it's fascinating how people come to Krishna consciousness. So many different ways. And you are right, it's one of the things that attracts most people the most. We want to hear about how others how came to Krishna consciousness. Thank you, Prabhu. Nice point. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, I'll finish there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.